Hello and welcome. In this session for the Eating Disorders and ARFID in Children and Adolescents conference, I am hoping to present the school-based perspective. What I really want to do here is to give my clinical colleagues and those who work therapeutically with our children and young people an idea as to what we do in schools in order to promote positive body image and prevent the escalation of such difficulties, i.e. eating disorders in our children and young people. At the start, I think it's really important to highlight the fact that we have in schools currently designated mental health leads, and since 2018, since the pilot study, we've actually been really working collectively together with our colleagues in ACAMH services and across other services such as educational psychology services in order to promote mental health wellbeing curricula in schools and also whole school approaches to mental health in our children and young people. And an essential element of this is obviously the staff training, because what we want to do is ensure that we put preventative measures in place in our schools so that children and young people do not go on to develop such complex difficulties. And much of this is done by building resilience and autonomy through the wellbeing curriculum and whole school systems and approaches. Ultimately, what we want to be able to do is provide a clear route where we are saying these are the essential ingredients in school as to the wellbeing curriculum. This is what we're doing in order to prevent these difficulties, whilst also having a clear pathway and route into essential CAMH services, etc., as and when our children and young people need them. There is obviously this current context of COVID, and I feel very, very passionate about this notion that we must avoid this catch-up narrative academically. At the moment, I think our children and young people, sadly, for many of them, are experiencing more heightened levels of stress and anxiety. And we know particularly those who had pre-existing conditions prior to the outbreak of this pandemic, those conditions have been exacerbated significantly. And I think they've missed a lot in the last 18 months in terms of socialisation, rites of passage, play, nurture, and also relationships with key adults, particularly for those who are more vulnerable, so that children can learn to self-regulate and can co-regulate with their peers too on a daily basis. And I think this is essential, and it's something that has been missed significantly, and that's led to heightened levels of anxiety in many of our children. So there is something going on here in terms of an escalation of difficulties, in my view. I know that referrals to our local services in my area for eating disorders have increased by 46%. And we know that the NHS has reported a 5-fold increase in referrals for eating disorders. The profiles also change. We're now seeing more boys, 48% of boys in my local context have been diagnosed with eating disorders and receiving support for those. So I think it's really important to highlight the fact that in schools, what we're doing is ensuring that staff have a basic grounding and understanding as how to recognise those children who may be more at risk, and also know how to actually make those referrals in the most effective way possible to the services that those children might need, alongside ensuring that there is a preventative wellbeing curriculum which really focuses on addressing some of these issues at the earliest opportunity. I think giving accurate information first is absolutely essential. So being clear about this, we must ensure in schools that our staff teams are well equipped to actually understand and manage as they can in the school context in terms of identifying these particular needs, but also in terms of not stigmatizing children and understanding these are significant mental health needs and issues: anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, emotional overeating, disordered eating, etc. So part of what we do as psychologists working in schools is to ensure that we're very clear that staff have a basic grounding. So we would, for example, be making use of the Wellbeing Toolkit for Mental Health Leads, where we have a 20-session CPD intervention for schools so that we can actually deliver this on a regular basis over the year in conjunction with the school's designated mental health lead. And this will include a module on eating disorders. So knowing the signs, the first signs, of course, is absolutely essential. And what we will do in schools, alongside looking at children who may have emotional needs, anxiety, depression, etc., is to think about eating disorders too. And there will be a basic screening across the school for wellbeing, mental health needs. And we will also put in place safety plans for those children who are most at risk in terms of self-harm, eating disorders, and other mental health difficulties. So again, this is about training and ensuring that all our staff have access to really good quality CPD in this area. This training will include understanding common compulsive behaviours. So that cycle, the OCD cycle, the obsessions leading to anxiety, and then compulsions. And that may be the compulsion to restrict food intake. It may be the compulsion to self-harm. But it's important that staff understand and do not stigmatise children for engaging in these common compulsive behaviours. So what we'll also do is promote this notion that we have to actually understand what we should do in the first instance. I think it's important for clinical colleagues to understand that many of those adults in schools who are working with children with mental health difficulties are working as teaching assistants, for example, as support assistants. So it's really essential that they have access to appropriate training, but also that we ensure they have access to supervision and support from the designated safeguarding lead and mental health lead in schools. So just being very clear about avoiding approaching children we're concerned about at meal times. This sounds very simple if you are a clinician, but in schools it's important that people don't overreact. It's important that we focus on children's feelings and behaviours and not on their weight, food or appearance. We also need to know when this is or is not a medical emergency. So again, accessing training in that particular area is essential. And we need to provide a really safe, nurturing context so that children and young people feel safe to come and talk about this. And we need to understand and promote the fact that this is not something that we need to judge children on or about. Very, very important that we don't present to them as being shocked or angry or defensive. We know that that impedes help seeking in the short and longer term. So basically, it's about ensuring that staff know the route to make a referral. They feel safe in doing that, and they understand that it will be taken on by the mental health team and the designated mental health lead in the school. Also encouraging the development of self-help strategies for eating disorders. And clearly, again, this is not school-based staff working as clinicians, but it's actually part of developing and delivering a wellbeing curriculum in schools that really does help and support our children and young people. So as part of that, we will be making use of tools from CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, self-help booklets, online access to apps that really support, and mindfulness resources too, and encouraging the use of support groups and the communication between home and school, and just basic health and safety rules around avoiding alcohol, etc. So also important is this self-help strategies for comorbidities. I shall come back to this. So essentially what we're trying to do in schools is really promote a positive body image. Okay, and I think this is really important that staff in schools understand that the idea of celebrating our bodies is an adult one. And really, according to Sigmund, and I think this is something that I concur with totally, children's bodies need to be thought about less, talked about less, and just merely taken for granted. And this is important because we know that children at a much younger age than previously are now being diagnosed with eating disorders, and it's very significant in some of our primary schools at the moment. We're noticing 6, 7, 8-year-olds who are really obsessed with their weight, for example. So what we want to do essentially is create a culture in our schools where we focus on appreciating our bodies. So we think about what our bodies can do, we appreciate the tasks that they can accomplish and achieve, and we respond with gratitude, seeing their bodies as something not to punish with diets, exercise, or making those cruel comparisons to others, or using cruel words to ourselves or to others about our appearances. And ultimately, it's also about increasing children's resilience to pressures on their body image. And I think this is really, really important. Challenging this visual conformity of the media by enabling them to see that there are many different forms of beauty. And it's really important to put more emphasis on our personal attributes, our character, achievements, talents and abilities, and having this positive feel-good attitude about going on in life and having this kind of growth mindset, as Carol Dweck says. So that's part of what we would do as a whole school approach. And I think it's also important, staff in schools are now being trained to recognise the need for the more therapeutic, curious relationships with our children and young people. And this is particularly important now in this time of the COVID pandemic, when many more of our children are presenting with emotional, social difficulties. So really important, we know what matters for our children and young people, that having that actually undivided attention from an adult who's really listening to them, that's talking them through their worries, is extremely helpful. And this is really important, rather than the child just inwardly focusing on themselves and feeling obsessive about their body or their self-image. So very, very important. I also think that what we're doing as part of our whole school approach is to think about reducing screen time and making this part of what we teach in our wellbeing curriculum. We know that engaging in social comparisons is not good for our body image, and it's really, really important that we highlight the need to take more time off social media and reduce that. I call it having a digital detox. Understanding that this is about control is also essential for school-based staff, because this generates more empathy in those relationships, in my view. So knowing and understanding that eating disorders is not necessarily about the food itself, it's really about the feelings and the way that someone interacts with food. Obviously, clinicians know this, will make them feel more able to cope, will make them feel more able to be in control, and having that level of autonomy is clearly what is so important for these children and young people. So we ensure that this is part of our training, alongside building an awareness of resilience and how to effectively teach Carol Revich's 7 core skills of resilience as part of a wellbeing curriculum. And I think it's really important, because for many teachers in the past, they will have said that they thought children were naturally resilient. And we know, of course, that adverse childhood experiences do have a huge impact on children and young people's mental health and physical well-being as they go forward. And this can impact well into later life. Excuse me. So we teach children and young people, as part of our wellbeing curriculum, how to beat worries, and we teach them key strategies. And these are just very simple ones here that would be part of any kind of wellbeing curriculum in our both primary and secondary schools, obviously differentiated in terms of language for younger children, but thinking about noticing how and when they are feeling worried, actually keeping records of that, and keeping a diary or a visual record for younger children, knowing how to stop and actually just take some time away from that negative pattern of automatic thinking, feeling and behaving, having worry times, particularly specified, so that we can write down our worries, process them, think about them, and then leave them behind as we go off to actually engage in more positive self-talk or activities which just generate those feel-good endorphins in our bodies. So it's really important children and young people can do this stuff. So as part of the curriculum, this is what essentially we're trying to teach them. For example, we may teach them how to use the stress bucket and think about stress as a bucket where they've got to kind of open the taps to let some of that stress out in order to keep it manageable, recognizing, of course, that stress and anxiety are normal things that we will experience on a daily basis. So not over medicalizing every little worry and concern that we have, but recognizing how to use relaxation, hobbies, self-care strategies, and keeping a diary, so managing this more effectively and analyzing the moments when I'm more stressed. So what could I do differently in those particular situations? And again, for the staff team, this is around giving them some specific training in stress and anxiety management. This is about giving them specific training in actually using key tools from CBT and solution-focused therapy. So thought challenging, again, will be part of this curriculum. And it's really, really important that all our children are taught that thoughts are not necessarily facts, and how to challenge their ineffective thinking, and how to actually cognitively reframe. So it's not as simple, obviously, colleagues will know this, as turning a negative to a positive, but it's about actually looking for the evidence for and against that negative thought. So very, very important. This is just a very simple structure that we would use for actually going through this step by step with a child or a young person. And obviously, again, this is something that we can do individually, but it's also something that we would teach as part of the whole school, the class, the form time curriculum. And one of the key elements to any wellbeing curriculum, which hopes to promote well-being, obviously, is to challenge this notion of perfectionism, because very often what we find with children who are engaging in self-harming behaviours or eating disordered behaviours, it is around this notion of being and feeling perfect, the need to be perfect. So we talk about being brave rather than being right, brilliant or excellent. We talk about learning from mistakes, that, you know, mistakes are fine, they're okay, they're learning opportunities. We promote a positive outlook. We promote this notion of growth mindset. I can't do this yet, it doesn't matter if I get it wrong. We also promote a narrative around being compassionate to ourselves, so promoting this notion of self-compassion, letting things go, using mindfulness. And in a sense, what we're trying to do here is give children a real sense that they can develop their own toolbox for well-being. So hopefully this does make sense in the sense that we're thinking about preventative measures here in order to ensure that our children do not go on to develop more significant difficulties in all areas of their well-being and mental health. So part of our curriculum will be to ensure that children know how to make their own anxiety ladders. And this is really, really important. This is taken directly from a resource called It's Okay to Feel Okay. Not okay, it's okay to not feel okay, sorry. And I think it's really important that children are aware of this, that, you know, they're not going to be happy and relaxed and okay on a daily basis. Sometimes they are going to have more difficulties. So actually giving them the key tools and strategies to manage that more effectively is an essential. One of the key tools is to develop their own anxiety ladder. So drawing a ladder with 10 or more steps, it can be less or more than that. And then what they do is they actually put at the top of this ladder the thing that they're most frightened of, the thing they're most fearful of, the thing that's worrying them the most. And they work in small steps, writing down on each of those steps a small thing that they can do in order to actually begin to overcome that particular fear or concern. And I think this is important. We used to talk in schools very much about making goals for learning cognitively, goals for well-being, for looking after ourselves. And we're tending now to talk more about small steps, because actually when we're heightened anxiety levels, when we are feeling more anxious, as many of our children are at this current time, this is clearly far more effective. So essentially what it's to do with is obviously, and you will know this as clinical colleagues, is building up that good evidence over time that it's okay to be with that feared object. It's okay, we will be able to overcome this, knowing that our fears are not there forever and that we can do something about them. So what we also do is support children in developing their own individual anxiety support plans. And this is about, excuse me, thinking about what their triggers are, what makes it worse, and what helps. When is it not quite so bad? So that solution-focused question, the exceptions, when is it not quite so bad? What small steps can I take now? So, you know, I'm in class, I'm getting worried, I'm concerned about something. What can I do right in this instance? It's important to have those kind of first three things, actually, those essential things I can do to calm myself straight away. So again, this is about my toolbox for self-regulation. And then things I can do every day to look after my well-being. So activity scheduling, for example, those flow moments, introducing things on a daily basis that help me relax, that help to take my mind away from my worries or concerns. People I can go to for help, who I can talk to now and in the future, and then listing any websites or helplines or text lines that they may find helpful. And also in the anxiety support plan, we always say to children and young people to have at least one source of support that is available 24/7, that's helpful. So, because I think this is really essential, because they never know when they may need to access that kind of support. So again, this is to give you a flavour of what we would be doing and what we are doing currently in schools to support children in this area. And then, of course, as part of the whole school wellbeing curriculum, mental health curriculum, we will be generating our own programs to support children in promoting positive body image. And this is hot off the press from Hinton House Publications. I'm very, very proud of this because we have actually made use of many of these key tools and resources from this practical therapeutic resource over the years. So we've put it together in a programme so that school-based staff and practitioners can actually pick this up and deliver it quite safely. So what we're talking about here is actually giving children their own curriculum and their own key tools to really challenge, for example, the ideal, to understand what we're talking about when we talk about beauty and how we need to actually be very much more sophisticated in our ability to analyse the media, look at what is being photoshopped, look at the way in which images are manipulated and question that and analyse the messages that are given both for boys and girls in terms of notions of perfection, for example. So teaching children in session 5 to challenge stereotypes and myths and celebrate the differences, but also reflecting a bit more on our attitudes and behaviours, where they come from, focusing on the notion of this diet trap and how easy it is to get caught up in that, and how we need to actually engage in more effective ways to challenge and manage our ineffective thinking. So again, there are elements of CBT here, mindfulness, key elements from positive psychology. And this is really about destigmatizing, but also promoting effective tools and strategies to really build those good body habits and those good thinking habits that will help us moving forwards. So essentially, I hope that this has given you a flavour of how we intend and do try to promote positive body image, but also highlight and identify those children who may be at risk of eating disorders, self-harm and other mental health difficulties in our schools, while simultaneously we screen for that, but we also simultaneously promote and build a resilience wellbeing curriculum. Ultimately, what we want to be able to do is give children those wellbeing tools, those skills for life that will help them create their own toolbox of wellbeing. So I think it's important always to be challenging them. What are they doing now? What are you doing now? What works for you? What could you do more of? What do you need to do less of? So hopefully this has given you a flavour, and obviously, you know, if there are more questions, then at the end of this presentation, I'm obviously going to be available to answer those questions. So thank you very much for listening to this today.